So one of the most important aspects to awakening medicine and just to awakening generally is to begin to become the observer of your mind. Now, we've already discussed that the mind is much more than the brain. You know, memories are not necessarily stored in the brain. Lots of different activities happen in the brain, but actual memories, and in particular trauma, is held where it's carried and it's stored in the actual body. So, for instance, if you've had an accident or an injury and now you're living with a certain amount of stress and strain just held in the body because the nature of our medical establishment doesn't acknowledge the holistic nature of the natural man or woman's organism, the physical form. And that's where alternative therapies are very, very different, and you really want to begin to start embracing it and bringing it into your experience of life. And that is where we begin to understand how and what we're holding. We're holding it because we're actually carrying it. We are, you've had an accident, you've had an injury, now you've got this scar tissue, and it's even harder than just a repetitive strain and pattern of your reactive stress, okay? And it can very much be holding a great deal more than just your regular feelings of frustration or irritability. It can actually be holding or carrying, an extreme state of fear, trauma, shock often. And quite often when a person is left with shock in the body, it can even further disassociate you from your experience. Because the nature of shock is this. Shock is like a held breath where the diaphragm gets squeezed up towards the lungs. The lungs compress in, the throat shuts down, and we're left with the feeling of a void. And so people can quite often then move into their lives carrying this state of shock that makes them feel pretty numb, actually, pretty well numbed out. And all these different states of being are contributing to the whole of what I've coined the complicated health stress picture. And that's why this can seem to be quite a complicated program in some ways, is because we have to break it down. We have to, really break down the different aspects of who we are as a living being in this plane of existence. And so what we really want to do when we're bringing ourselves into the state of as the observer or the witness, or I've even heard it described as noticer, is we're bringing the light of awareness in the form of an illumination back to the cell. Now, right at the very beginning, I said that, as if by magic, bing. And, that even though that does kind of feel a little bit, to a certain extent, disempowering, it's like it's magic, there's not really much I can do about it. That's where you are about to change your frequency and your whole understanding of life as you know it, which is that we have the potential to just instantly manifest. In fact, we're doing it all the time. We just manifest what we're thinking in a very simple way, as what you're thinking is your experience. So the more that we begin to unravel that difficult experience that we've held on to, trying to ignore, and yet has driven our behaviours in an uncomfortable way for most of our lives, because these experiences very, very much begin, you could say, at conception, but much more than that, it's in the formative years of our lives. So that's the first 2 years of our lives, as well as incorporating up to the first 7 years of our lives. Now, of course, people go through accidents, injuries, traumas, and experiences throughout their whole life. And yes, if you've had a shock or trauma, as well as things like, taking harsh substances that may change the brain chemistry and things like that. Of course, these are all related to your health stress picture. But when it comes to our actual base instinct and our base level triggers, very, very much relating to the survival of the first 2 years of life. And were your needs met, or were you just left to kind of self-soothe? So when we begin to unravel what we're holding, the natural aspect of that, okay, is going to be you're creating movement. So what was locked up in the cell is starting to shift and change. It's starting to slowly open, and then at some point there's going to be a release. That may well happen, and yet you haven't brought the conscious light of awareness to the process. And as a result of that, it's going to a certain extent, it's going to stay stuck. What we're really being called to do here is stay totally present during our process. Okay, so it's an internalized one. We're moving, we're opening, something's released, and we need to keep bringing our attention back to the mind, back to what we're actually thinking, what's going through the mind. Okay, now there's an actual exercise that we can do to begin to get this to switch on in you. The mind is set out in 3 aspects. We have the conscious mind, we have the subconscious mind, and we have the unconscious mind. Now, a lot of people think the unconscious mind is the subconscious mind, and that's unhelpful. The unconscious is very much that. It's unconscious, and it doesn't mean we can't hear it, but what it means is it's driving our behaviours, and the subconscious mind isn't doing that. It's the part of our brain that just is on repeat. It's just a record that's just turning. Okay, that's the unconscious mind. It's just constant, and it's thinking about, according to Google, life according to Google, about 60,000 thoughts a day. Okay, really difficult to, harness some of that and really get a sense of what it is that we're thinking and feeling. So we got to become present, and part of the secret of doing that is to do a technique or an exercise, even just set aside some time to become present and to bring it into process, a focused process and prayer. So here's a great exercise. I really want you to try at home. You start either lying down. Like I said, I love lying down. It's only now, having done this process for about 10 years, that my body is now being pulled magnetically into sitting posture. I had to give up sitting. I didn't sit in meditation for a very long time because it was just too painful for me. I I didn't always avoid. I used to do meditation and I'd go through the pain, and a lot of your principles are going to be teaching you that. Whatever. Okay, that's up to you. My way in was through relaxation. I had to totally drop. I wanted to totally drop, and I wanted to create relaxation in my body because I was holding pain. And I think if you carry on holding on top of pain, you're going to create. But when you create relaxation, you can very much build on that and encourage that and incorporate that more and more into your life as well. And as a result of that, I thought, my God, I'm never going to be able to sit again. As a result of that, I have felt myself now pulled into a magnetically aligned posture. And it's beautiful. Really feels good. But I had to get there through seriously. And even before I got there to the primal scream, I had to go into the drop and I had to disappear. So here's the exercise. Start by sitting or lying down and focus the conscious mind. That's the first part. You just want to use a hypnosis technique. So you're using a hypnosis technique of counting ideally backwards, because it takes a little bit more conscious awareness to count backwards than it does to count forwards. We're much, more versed in counting forwards. So we're going to start at 100, could be 200, 300, whatever feels good. And you start to count backwards. Now, the first thing you could do to begin to even realise that there's a second part of your brain that's working, okay, you're going to begin to start to utilise the 3 parts of your brain. First part, you're counting. You're going to notice that you just go off track a little bit. You just start thinking. You forget about your counting. You forget about your mantra. So the best thing to do in that case is to start again from 100, right? So every time you notice yourself thinking, you start again from 100, okay? Or 200 or wherever you started. Then, so that's the first part of the exercise. You start counting. When you notice that you're thinking, you've gone into thinking, that's the unconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is going to be the one that notices that. We're switching on the subconscious mind. And it's the messenger between the conscious and the unconscious. So the first thing I want you to do is just begin to switch on the subconscious mind. And that's the noticer. Oh, I'm thinking, right, start again from 100. And do that for several cycles. Then what I want you to do is notice when you're thinking and very much try and catch, what was it that I was thinking? What was I thinking? So before you go back to counting again, which you will do, we're trying to control the mind. This is self-control, this is self-discipline. The mind is a monkey and it's going to have you whirling round in circles looking like a clown. You have got to harness the power of the mind before it harnesses you and literally, I don't even think about it, okay? So start counting with the conscious mind. The unconscious mind is going to come in with a thought or a feeling, and then notice it with the subconscious mind. Come back to your starting place and do that several times. Then counting, thinking, noticing, what was I thinking? And just see if you can begin to just catch the very edge of that thought and just start to bring it in more and more. So each time then, after you've done the initial 5 or 6 rounds just with the bringing back, each time then thereafter, just keep coming back to what was it I was thinking, see if you can harness it, and then go back into the counting. Okay. Have fun.